The Louisville Cardinals have won 10 straight games, and they didn't lose a single one in the month of January.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Wednesday / post-game recap edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 5th year covering the University of Louisville, 3rd year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do, download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. The Louisville Cardinals extend the winning streak to 10 games, completing the undefeated month of January. On Tuesday, Louisville defeating Wake Forest by double digits, 8-0 this past month, and looking ahead to a really opportune month of February. We'll break down this game on Tuesday. We'll discuss whether or not it's time to change expectations for the team as we get closer to postseason play, and then we'll give a brief look into February, the 7 total games, 5 on the road and 2 home games. Louisville, 10-game winning streak. It's awesome to see this happen after the rough start to the year with the tough non-conference schedule, the injuries that Louisville dealt with, Louisville having to rely on a game winner to beat Eastern Kentucky, and that sort of just served as the catalyst to this incredible run in which 7 of the 8 games in the month of January were won by double digits. So it's not like Louisville was getting lucky, so to speak. They were defeating these teams emphatically. The only single-digit win came on the road against Pittsburgh. That was a quad 1 win. It felt like Louisville Basketball made a resolution, said, you know what, our resolution for the new year is to not lose a single game in January. And unlike 90 to 95% of resolutions made, this one actually turned out to be successful. Louisville completed an undefeated month of January. They were handed a ton of tests. They didn't only pass those tests, they aced those tests, and they looked really, really good. Louisville on Tuesday defeated Wake Forest 72-59. They covered the 9.5-point spread. Now, this game wasn't as close as the final score suggests. The Cardinals had a 24-point lead, and they had a 21-point lead or a 19-point lead going into that last media timeout, and Louisville didn't score after the 4-minute mark. But at that point, Pat Kelsey said it. You're rarely ever going to play a perfect game. You're leading by that much. They took their foot off the gas a little bit. Hunter Salas got ejected. Cameron Hildreth left the game with injury and didn't return. It felt like at that point the Cardinals said, okay, you know what, we're just going to coast until, that final horn sounds. So I'm not going to criticize a team for not, being able to just keep their foot on the gas in a blowout win. It was really similar to the SMU game. It was close for a portion of the first half. Then the Cardinals went on a run. They pushed the halftime lead to over 20. They stayed around that range for most of the second half. And then the opposing team went on a little bit of a run, but it wasn't enough. Louisville got a blowout victory, a quad 2 victory, technically. Wake Forest was right around the 70s of the net. But Louisville is 8-0 in the month of January. And I admit, I said it on the preview episode. I was concerned about the spread because I was vocal about how much I liked Steve Forbes as a coach. I felt like Wake Forest defensively could throw a wrench in Louisville's game plan. They played Duke really competitively over the weekend. They had found their winning formula up until that point. I was like, you know what? I know that Louisville's playing really, really good, but it just feels like Wake Forest is going to make this game really muddy, and it's going to be low scoring, and offense is going to be a luxury in this contest, and Louisville's going to win by less than 10 points. And it's pretty clear that I was way wrong, like very, very wrong. I did say Louisville was going to win. I didn't know if they were going to cover the spread. I did on Mondays with Dalton Pence on Big X Sports Radio. I said a 10-point win. So technically, depending on what you got the spread at, I did maybe say that Louisville was going to cover. But I didn't expect the Cardinals to be, right there on a potential 30-point deficit, or a 30-point lead, I should say. My apologies. But it's just a testament to this team staying in the moment. Look, they're on a winning streak. The vibes are good. They're picking up national attention. They're becoming more and more relevant as the season goes on. They're being talked about from a tournament hopeful to now a potential dark horse team in the big dance. So, there's a lot of distractions out there, positive distractions, but nonetheless distractions to where, they pump your head up and you sort of let go of the urgency and you end up losing a game you're not supposed to. In Louisville, credit to Pat Kelsey and this group. They've done such a good job of staying in the moment. And it goes back to what Pat Kelsey said in the offseason. Every single practice, every single day that we are together is the most important day, is the most important practice, is the most important lift or workout or game in Louisville basketball history. And that's the mindset. That's the culture that Pat Kelsey is installing. So you're seeing that put in place. The Cardinals 16-5. They are 9-1 in conference play, tied for second with the Clemson Tigers, who will play. I think So Clemson beat Virginia Tech over the weekend, and I think they don't play again until this upcoming weekend. So that would make sense because they played one more game than the Cardinals. But looking at this game specifically, I sort of got frustrated with the antics of Wake Forest. It felt like there was a lot of flopping this game. I'll just be completely honest. I felt like there were some calls that it's like, okay, it's pretty clear that it might not have been a flop, but he tripped on his feet and it was called flop, or I'm sorry, it was called an offensive foul or a defensive foul. They let them play for the most part in the first half, which I appreciate. But if you're going to let them play, just be consistent. Don't pick and choose moments when to start calling the game tighter than you have been. But against a really good defensive team, Louisville shot 39% from the field, 30% or 31% from three, and 15 of 21 from the free throw line. The three-point numbers were much better in the first half. They didn't shoot the ball well in the second half. The Cardinals' lead was established when Terrence Edwards hit multiple three-pointers, Rain Smith hit a three-pointer, and they went on that run to push the lead to double digits. And at that point, the Cardinals didn't look back. The lead did not dip into single digits for the remainder of the game, for the rest of the game. And we talked about the SMU performance. It's nice to see that when you get the lead, that you're not immediately blowing it. Because early on in the month of January, you had some double-digit leads. I look at the game against Clemson, that you had a double-digit lead. Virginia, you had some sizable leads that, you weren't able to hold up. You did hold up until the end, but you let those teams come back and get within striking distance. You didn't allow SMU or Wake Forest to do that. We mentioned making life difficult for the top scoring option. Now, Hunter Salas did lead the way with 13 points, but he shot 12 shots. So, 5 of 12 from the field, not terrible, obviously. I mean, it's close to 50% from the field. But if you're telling me that Hunter Salas is only going to score 13 points and he's going to do so on 12 shots, I'm going to say, heck yeah, sign me up. He ended up getting ejected from this game because he obviously said something the first technical foul that the referee didn't like, and he called the technical foul. And then he dunked on, I forget who it was, he dunked on a Cardinals player, and he immediately turned around and made a hand gesture and obviously was talking trash, and the referee called it. I mean, it was a pretty simple call there. And I'm actually pretty surprised of the Wake Forest reaction to it because it was pretty clearly a technical foul. But Cameron Hildreth, the second leading scorer, 1 of 6, 2 points. Louisville made it tough for him. Efton Reed had 11 points. At times, he was able to get what he wanted. He had 13 rebounds as well. Louisville ended up actually being out-rebounded by Wake Forest, which I was a little bit surprised with, but it is what it is. They shot 38% from 3, 8 of 21, which is well above their season average. They average about 28% from 3 line. They shot 38%. Definitely more attempts and more makes than they're used to. 41% from the field. Main thing here is they had 15 turnovers to 10 assists. When you force a team to turn the ball over significantly more than they're able to facilitate it, then yeah, it's going to spell some good things for your team. So good performance. I don't obviously think it was perfect. It was good enough to beat a team that offensively struggles a ton, and that was the case coming into the game. Like if Louisville's offense is even close to the potential that they can play at, then they're probably going to win this game, and they did. So good win. Louisville 10-game winning streak, 8-0 in the month of January. They're 16-5, and I know that I've said it, and I'm going to stay true to my word. It's time to change expectations for this squad. We'll do so when we come back on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets, that's the icing on the cake for the Super Bowl. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's on FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Many people have commented over the past couple of weeks throughout this winning streak, questioning whether or not my expectations for this team has changed. Now, let me go ahead and define those expectations so we have the reference point. At the beginning of the season, I predicted on air with the Locked On College Basketball host Isaac Shade that Louisville was going to go 21-10 and finish top 4 in the ACC. Now, this was before Corin Johnson only played 2 games before he was to miss the remainder of the year. This was before Kason Pryor tore his ACL in the battle for Atlantis. This was before Boubacar Traore broke his arm and had to miss, a good portion of the non-conference schedule. But even then, I said I still think the expectation is to make the tournament because I believed in the team. I believed in the coaching staff. I believed that the schedule was going to get easier than the non-conference slate and that this team would have the ability to stack up wins, to get close to the NCAA tournament bubble, and to make the NCAA tournament. That has been the expectation since November, to make the NCAA tournament. Now, I do think that when you make expectations, especially for a season, you reserve the right to adjust those expectations. Now, I don't think it, like if you're toning down those expectations, I don't think it excuses like bad level of play. Like the past couple of years at Louisville, we've had to tone down expectations. I don't think it excuses anything, but I do think that you have to be honest about what you're watching on the court, on the field, whatever sport you're watching at the time. But Louisville now 16-5, 9-1 in conference play, top 25 in the net, number 21 in the country in the AP poll, ranked in the coaches poll. I mentioned halfway through January, if Louisville is able to succeed through the end of the month and handle SMU and Wake Forest, then I would change my expectations. And just because I haven't changed the expectations doesn't take away my thoughts on the team. Like I have changed what my perception is on the ceiling. Like I went from like being a tournament team to, well, now I think the ceiling is second weekend. But I'm not going to say that that's the expectation, because what I don't want to do, and people will take this as me being pessimistic, you have to understand with the way that I operate, I try to be as unbiased as I can with predictions, with expectations, because I don't want to be a sunshine pumper. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I want to look at things objectively and, make the right prediction from a non-biased perspective. And that's the same thing with expectations. My emotions are telling me that this team is possibly going to make a run, but expectations, I'm like, okay, I don't want to watch this team go on this winning streak and say, well, now the expectation is to, this, and this, but maybe Louisville loses a couple games and you have to continually change expectations. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to continually change them, but there's enough sample size, 10 straight wins out of a season with 31 regular season contests. I'm changing the expectations. I've seen enough. My expectations have gone from making the NCAA tournament. Well, there we go. Making the NCAA tournament to winning an NCAA tournament game. And that might not seem like much, but it is. I do believe it is. Because right now you're looking at where Louisville is slated at in bracketology. They started out in that 8 to 9 range. Now they're sort of getting up to that 5 and 6 range and knocking on the door and saying, hey, listen here, Joe Lenardi, listen here, Jerry Palm, you need to start putting us in that 4 spot range. And where I'm at right now is this kind of feels like it's, self-explanatory, but if you are a seed 1 through 7, you are expected to win a tournament game. You may not, but you're going to be expected to. Now, I know that upsets happen all the time. I'm not suggesting the contrary, but you have no reason as a top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 seed, in my opinion, to lose in the NCAA tournament. You may lose to a team that is playing much better, but again, that doesn't take away the notion that you are expected to win a tournament game. If Louisville continues their streak and they don't have a, knock on wood, catastrophic month of February or March, they're going to be expected to win at least one tournament game. So at the moment, on January 29th, at around midnight, whenever you're listening to this, it's airing at midnight. The expectation for Louisville is to win at least one tournament game. Now, what happens if the Cardinals continue this winning streak through the month of February and they get put on a top 4 seed line? At that point, the expectations would change again. It would be now second weekend would be the expectation. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't like to change expectations drastically and frequently. I think that, your expectations should be sort of a long-term thing. Now, the ceiling might change, but I'm not really someone who's going to draw that rash of a reaction from one specific game, unless it's like you get like a marquee win or you just have a disastrous loss that you have no way to defend. So at this point, I think what I really want to get across this specific segment is that expectations and possible projections and ceiling are different. Like, thinking that Louisville can be a second weekend team is different than saying they're expected to make the second weekend. Like, can Louisville, like right now, can they make the second weekend? Of course they can. Am I expecting them to right now? Not yet. And that might be unpopular. Like, some might say, well, how's this not a second weekend team? I mean, if you're a 6 seed and you have to go up against a 3 seed, or if you're a 5 going up against a 4, you win a tournament game and you lose in the round of 32, I'm not going to really be all that upset in year one of Pat Kelsey. But if you go through the month of February and you start extending this winning streak and you lose less than one game in the month of February and you handle business in March and you make some noise in the ACC tournament, you best believe we're going to change those expectations again. Right now, I'm just kind of enjoying the ride. It really doesn't matter the expectation at the moment because we've got over a month left in the regular season. There's 10 games remaining, and I think it's a pretty good time to now let's take a look ahead at the month of February. 7 games for the Cardinals, 5 of them on the road, which honestly might be advantageous for Pat Kelsey's team. We'll break down who Louisville has to go up against, who the largest challenges I think will be coming from, and much more when we come back on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, I want to take this time to, again, thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. There will be a football episode this week. We're going to give a live reaction to the football schedule. We'll talk about the new quarterback commit that the Cardinals got, and then we'll have some more football discussion. We will preview the Saturday matchup against Georgia Tech and much more as we continue throughout the week. But let's take a look at the month of February for the Cardinals because it's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde situation. Louisville was tested extremely in the month of January, which if you look at the other ACC schedules like Clemson and other top teams like Wake Forest, well, maybe not Wake Forest, but SMU, it's kind of a situation to where Louisville has played top teams through the month of January, and then they will play sort of the bottom of the ACC in February. And it's sort of flip-flop for the other top teams. So that is really beneficial for a team that's kind of going toe-to-toe with the Clemson Tigers right now, who both teams are currently 9-1. So at this moment, let's look at the schedule. You've got at Georgia Tech, who as of Wednesday morning, they're 9-11, 3-6 in conference play. Okay? You've got at Boston College. After that, Boston College is 9-11, 1-8 in conference play. Versus Miami, who is at the very bottom. They're 4-16. They're 0-9. They have not won a conference game, and they are trending in the absolute wrong direction. At NC State just took Duke down to the wire. However, they are the third worst team in the ACC via the standings, 9-11, 2-7 in conference play. You'll go to South Bend to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame, a little bit better, 9-10, 3-5 in conference play. Florida State, 13-7, 4-5 in conference play. And then at Virginia Tech, 8-12, 3-6 in conference play. The two common denominators here. Number one, 6 of the 7 teams that Louisville is slated to play before we start the month of February do not have a record over 500. I know that, winning a road game in the ACC is not the easiest thing to do. Winning a conference game in general is not the easiest thing to do because anyone can technically lose on any given night. But Florida State doesn't have a winning conference record. So all of the teams that Louisville is slated to play at the current moment, it might be different when they play these teams, but at the moment, none of these teams, none of the 7 teams have a winning record in conference play. Louisville has already played the majority of those teams. They lost to Duke. That's it. They beat Clemson, who's second in the conference, tied for second. They beat Wake Forest, who's third. They beat SMU, who's tied for fourth. They beat North Carolina, who's tied for fourth. They beat Pittsburgh, who's in fifth. And they beat Florida State, who's in 6th. So January, they got tested. Now it's sort of a different conversation. It's like, okay, you proved how good you are. Can you maintain that? Can you handle business against a team that at this point is not going to make the tournament, but they're just trying to spoil your season? You have a target on your back. You're no longer the underdog. You could be double-digit favorites in most of these games. How are you going to handle that compared to how you handled being an underdog or basically in a toss-up game? And I think that the Cardinals, by looking at how they've been able to stay in the moment, you're feeling pretty good. I look at this 7-game stretch in February, and I'm like, chat, where's the loss coming from? Like, we all know that this winning streak's not going to last forever. Or is it? That would be incredible. Go 26-5 in the regular season. Where's the loss coming from? I don't know. Like, I think Louisville's going to beat Georgia Tech and Boston College and Miami. Maybe at NC State, at Notre Dame. Maybe it's Florida State, although you beat Florida State on the road by double digits. Maybe it's a weird game at Virginia Tech. Maybe it's March 1st when you play Pittsburgh at home. California and Stanford come to the Center that following week. So I think no matter what, I don't think Louisville can really afford to go less than 6-1 in the month of February. Like, there's no reason for Louisville to lose more than one game, and technically they're going to be favored in all 7. You could argue that Louisville should win every game in the month of February, and it's a very real possibility that they do. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse here, though, and say, we're going to look ahead and overlook teams. We're just going to stay in the moment and focus on each and every game like we've done up until this point. So the next game on the schedule is against Georgia Tech down in Atlanta, 3:45 tip-off at McCamish Pavilion down in the 404. Making me predict the record, which people have asked, what do you think is going to happen in the month of February? My prediction is this team will lose no more than one game. I'm going to kind of take the easy road and say that, give myself a cushion and say that Louisville will lose no more than one game. I'm sort of torn on 7-0 and 6-1. Like, winning 17 straight games is not probable, but this team is obviously special in its own way. So I'm kind of looking at this saying that I really don't know what's going to happen, but my hope is that the team just continues to excel and they continue to demolish teams and get double-digit victories. And if you can do that, I mean, you're going to continue to build your resume. I do think that the toughest test for me, like, let's say that like Florida State at the moment is the toughest test. Who would it be outside of that? I think just because Louisville doesn't play the greatest against Notre Dame, maybe it's Notre Dame. I do kind of look at this NC State team that, I mean, they've lost 5 straight games, but they've been competitive in the games against SMU and against Duke. I'm going to go with Florida State and Notre Dame going to be the toughest matchups in the month of February. But 10-game winning streak, we're going to celebrate it. Until next time on the Locked On Louisville podcast, everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here coming up very soon.